Hello and welcome to MSE 402 Project Management. My name is Dale Deerdorf. I'm your facilitator, coach, and instructor for all the sessions. We're going to focus on Module 4 and the project execution phase. Your course lecture is going to be based upon that fourth phase in our academic project management flow, which is focusing on MS project as far as creating the cost baseline, working on project execution to then draw down earned value, looking at the communications, monitoring, and controlling of a project as part of that flow, and then walking down into starting to work on finishing the project. But the project execution phase is probably one of the more, I'll call it lengthy. Let's go ahead and pull this up so I can show you. By lengthy, I mean it is going to take over time a longer period of time, and it's going to take a lot more process interaction, as it shows over in the graphic in the middle here. Our executing process group is part of that PMBOK focus. So I want to get this for you. The new PMBOK, I want you to go to page 69, and you're going to see it's the project work performance domain. That's the focus of where this presentation is going to go, because the project work performance domain addresses activities and functions associated with establishing project processes, managing physical resources, and fostering a learning environment. That is the focus of what this lecture is going to focus in on. So if you take a look at that executing phase, you can see that we've already finished the introduction phase, the initiating phase, and then the planning phase. Now it's time to do the execution of the project. You can see that that whole flow gets us down to a point where when we get into the monitoring and controlling phase, which comes in the next lecture, it overlaps everything from the initiating phase all the way down into the control, the closing phase. This executing phase is focused specifically on the performance of the project. So that's ultimately where we're headed, because we've talked about effectiveness and efficiency being the two areas that we want you to kind of control. The executing process group consists of those processes performed to complete the work defined to satisfy the project scope, the project objectives, and project specifications. It involves coordinating people, resources, while managing stakeholder expectations. Now, as we talked about, that difference between effective and effectiveness and effective, the difference between being efficient and effective is that efficiency refers to how well you do something, while effectiveness refers to how useful that something actually is. So let's take a look at effective. It satisfies or exceeds all customer requirements, adequate to accomplish a purpose, producing the intended or expected results. Efficient means all internal requirements for cost, margin, asset utilization, and other efficiency measures. Efficiency refers to how well you do something by performing or functioning in the best possible manner with the least waste of time and effort. The right people at the right place at the right time doing the right thing. That's ultimately what we're trying to get to. That's what I want you to be able to use as your, I'll call it your project management goals as you move forward. So remember that efficiency is the amount of resources used to achieve a project objective against what was or will actually be accomplished. The more favorable the ratio of between of benefits to costs, the greater efficiency achieved. And efficiency focuses on the project processes or the means to an end, which means you want to do things right. Too much emphasis in either direction tends to lead to mismanagement. You have to be effective to get the job done, but sometimes it costs a bit more or takes a bit longer to achieve a particular objective. This impacts your efficiency. So remember that you can always impact your effectiveness if you're stingy with resources or don't get the job done. But ultimately what you're looking for is a balanced approach. It means that the job gets done and your limited resources are not wasted, that everything flows together, and that's how you accomplish your goals. So let's talk about project executing struggles. Number one, There are typically 5 reasons that a project struggles in execution. These issues drive your project cost, schedule, quality, and resource effectiveness. The first is undefined tasks or subtasks. That means that when the project tasks and subtasks are not clearly identified, exactly what it took to accomplish it, the whole project and team can suffer. This is caused by a lack of clearly identifying the original scope up front, or from not recognizing the complexity of project tasks. That's number 1. Number 2 is going to be scope changes. We call it scope creep, but that occurs when the project manager allows the project scope to extend beyond its original objectives. Project stakeholders, clients, customers are always asking for changes to a project, even up until the day you're closing the project. They constantly want more. It takes a disciplined project manager to evaluate each request and decide how and if to implement it. This must be balanced with communicating the efforts and the effects on the project budget and deadlines to all stakeholders. Many times the structure is set up to where if there's an original change of scope coming in, you have to take it to an ERB, an engineering review board, or a program review board. It has to be approved. Both stakeholders and the customer, in conjunction with the program requirements, must agree on that scope change and implementation. If not, you continue moving forward. You must, if there's a process, follow that process for change, or else what will happen is the customer keeps laying, or the stakeholders keep laying on new changes, new updates. It's natural. That naturally happens, but as it says here, you, as the project manager and a program manager, must be the one, as a disciplined person, to evaluate each request and decide if it should be implemented. Now, number 3, the third element is poor communication. This is one that will come back to haunt every one of you. Project managers provide direction at every step of the project, so each team member knows what is expected. Not communicating the plan and thinking that it'll figure itself out is a terrible way for you as a project manager to continue moving forward. Effective communication to everyone involved in the project is crucial to its successful completion. You have to remember that project managers must have competent, not only written and oral communication skills, but they have to be able to listen. You have to be the person that listens to everything that's happening around you. You have to have a good level of intuition also. Proper communications can help increase morale by establishing clear expectations, but remember this, bad news travels fast. Faster than good news, that's for sure, and a PM must be able to understand exactly what's going on at all times. Good project managers keep communication and feedback flowing between all team members, all key stakeholders, the customer, every avenue. They keep it open. Now, number 4, impossible deadlines. Many times you inherit a project that has deadlines and milestones that are not only challenges, but maybe unrealistic and unachievable. I call this, you're inheriting the baking of the cake. It was mixed wrong in the start, the times are wrong, things like that. This requires a project manager to constantly ask the team, remember that, ask the team if the tasks and subtask completions are achievable within the project's schedule and delivery dates. Just because I say it's going to be done on Tuesday doesn't mean that it is possible for it to be done on Tuesday. I don't care if you call it a stretch goal and say it's going to be done on Tuesday, and we're all going to work as hard as we can. If everyone knows that it's impossible, then that just demotivates everyone, and they come back and they say, we told you it couldn't be done. It just becomes a waste of energy and time. So, realistic schedules. Number 5, resource deprivation. In order for a project to run effectively and efficiently, a project must have the sufficient resources. The right people, the right place, the right time. Remember that. Project management people resources require you have the right people at the right time doing the right thing throughout the duration of the project. That battle rhythm, that repeated ability to have the right people there to get things done is the way for you to succeed. So now let's talk about when the success is dependent upon things like project risk. You have to remember that a project manager will need to consider how they can encourage positive risks. Those are called opportunities, while attempting to prevent the negative ones. The negative ones are typically the ones that come back and cause you cost overruns, schedule overruns, resource issues, or technology problems. A project manager can do this by taking a proactive approach to risk management. If they try to control the risk before it happens, they can shape it. You can modify it, giving yourself the ability to kind of create the best situation in an environment where bad things are going to happen. While they can take a reactive approach, only involving themselves when the risk has already happened, it is always better for you to take the proactive approach. Get involved as early as possible. So remember that risk is an uncertain event or condition that, if it occurs, has a positive or negative effect on the project's objectives. A risk can be positive, meaning beneficial to the project, or it can be negative, meaning detrimental to the project. Now that's what the PMBOK is telling us is a great definition to it. Sometimes it can be difficult to visualize a positive risk. What does an opportunity look like? Which might be called which might improve the project. It is possible that positive risks will contain a way to reduce the project's costs or help complete the project earlier than anticipated. Those are the two biggest outcomes that we really want to look for. It is possible that a positive risk would be capable of improving the project's quality and/or overall performance. Now, let's talk about risk management from a project perspective. We learned that projects contain both risks. They're good and bad ones. We're going to refer to these as positive and negative risks. Other project managers might use terms opportunities and negative risks to describe them. While project managers might not address the risks, at all, sometimes they will attempt to pursue the positive ones or prevent the negative ones. So that risk versus reward that we have over on the side here, that is ultimately what we're looking at. The actions that the project manager takes will depend on many factors. These can best be described in a series of distinct stages, as I'm going to describe in the next two slides. First thing, methodology. A system of methods we use in order to determine what the risks are and how we should manage them. Remember that from a methodology standpoint. Responsibilities and roles. Who is going to be responsible for each of the steps within the process of risk management? The third piece of it, budget. How much are we willing to spend in order to manage our risks? And then the last piece of it, schedule. How much time are we going to dedicate or to spend on managing the risks in a project? Because all of those will have an impact not only on the bottom line for the project cost, but the duration, how long it takes to accomplish it. The next three things we're going to talk about are the risk categories, how we will group the risks in order to display them so they might be easily understood. We're going to also talk about defining the risk impact. What is the impact of the risk? Implementing ratings for our risks to ensure all of our team members understand which of the ones are the most dangerous or profitable. And then finally, stakeholder tolerance. How much risk the stakeholders of a project are willing to accept. How willing are you from a stakeholder perspective to allow me to go off and do things that are dangerous? Or are you going to rein me in and say, no, I can't accept that. It's got to be something more palatable. Those are the areas that we really need to understand are in play at the same time. Now, this is the step where we identify not just negative risks that are associated with a project, but also the positive ones. Some methods of accomplishing this include fishbone diagramming, to create that root cause analysis, a checklist analysis, Delphi interviewing, brainstorming, normal group interactions, and assumption analysis. Upon completion of this step, we'll have created and documented a risk register. And that risk register will contain both positive and negative risks. And our risk register is a list of all of our known risks. You have to remember that. It encompasses everything that we already know in addition to that. So we, for you, have created a template that you get as part of the ECS company from the PMO. It's going to be very similar to one you've seen before, and this risk register is referred to as a risk log. It is a master document which is created during the early stages of your project. So I know we're talking about it in the executing stage here, but in the beginning of the charter, in the scope statement, you started to think about what your big risks were. What were we looking at? What could come back to haunt us? And you started to identify those, the known knowns. Now we're starting to take a look at the project, and we're starting to look at what are the things that the unknown knowns that could happen, are the known unknowns. We start to look at things from a positive standpoint and say, what possible opportunities could arise on the horizon that would give me the opportunity to do things differently? Now, one of the things that you need to remember is that the risk register is a document containing the results of the qualitative risk analysis, quantitative risk analysis, and risk response planning. All three of those together, that connection, interconnection, that weaving of all of that together is what we refer to when we talk about risk management and the risk register. So after compiling all of our risks into that risk register, we'll now be able to compare them. We can look at them. We will be able to see which positive risks can yield the greatest results. What is the best bang for our buck, and which ones offer very little incentive to pursue. I don't want to spend $1 million to gain 20. We will be able to look at the biggest negative risks and be able to start thinking about contingency plans. Do we accept it knowing that it's going to happen, or do we transfer it away to somebody else, or do we find a way to modify that risk in some way? The way we do this through that risk register gives us the ability then to come back and create a risk matrix. This risk matrix is a qualitative evaluation. The qualitative risk analysis will allow us to examine both the probability and the impact of each one of those risks. And you can see that the red corner all the way at the top would be the very highest likelihood and the very highest impact. It would be the worst risk that could happen to us from a program standpoint. And then if we're looking at things from a positive perspective, you remember that we switch this around. It becomes very different. But right now we're looking at negative risks. These factors are ranked on a scale of 1 to 3 typically, sometimes 1 to 5. Low, medium, and high, very low, very low, low, medium, high, very high. So depending on the type of matrix that you're using, and some people use a 3x3, I prefer the 5x5 graphic illustration you have here. This allows anyone at any moment to quickly glance at our analysis and know which risks might be probable and have a high impact. Generally, the colors assigned to the chart are green, yellow, red. The red risks are the high in both impact and probability, and they require a proactive approach. Yellow risks, which are usually medium impact with medium probability, generally require a contingency plan of some sort. And finally, green risks, which are low impact and low probability, are generally placed on a watch list since they do not warrant an immediate action plan. Many times you can still close the project knowing that the green risks may be running in the background, but they're not going to stop you. Those red risks, those are the ones that will stop you dead in your tracks. Now remember that there's also quantitative risk analysis, and that's a step that further allows us to analyze our probable and impactful risk future. We're going to want you to know which ones are the most important for us to address. We actually model that. There are many tools available for this step, ranging from running simulations to creating decision trees, and also expended monetary value from a fiduciary standpoint. Since this step is usually expensive, it is generally reserved only for larger projects. Things that are really potentially impactful to the organization from a financial standpoint. So now that we have completed our analysis of our project risks, we should consider the positive and negative response strategies that can best cover the risks we identified. So let's start with positive risks. There are 5 different ways that we can react to a positive risk. We can exploit it. We make certain that the positive risk occurs because we want it. We add work to the work breakdown structure to ensure we maximize the probability of it. We go out of our way to make it happen. We can enhance it through enhancement. It simply means that we add to the probability that the risk will occur. What can I do to seed that? What can I do to make sure that happens? How can I set the stage for this to be something that we can exploit, since we're not ensuring that it occurs? Now, the next piece is sharing it. In sharing, we partner with other parties in order to help ensure that the risk will occur. The next one is active acceptance. While we do not take a proactive approach to attempt to force the risk to occur, we will create a contingency plan that says if the risk does happen, then the project team will be able to benefit from it, and this is how. And then there's finally the last piece, which is passive acceptance. In passive acceptance, this action is much like active acceptance, only instead of creating a contingency plan, the team does nothing proactive or reactive. It's usually reserved for a positive risk with very low probability or impact. If it happens, that's great. If it doesn't impact us that big. We don't worry about it, okay? Those are positive risks. Now let's look at negative risks and the responses associated with that, because there are 5 over here also. Avoidance, mitigation, transferring the risk, active acceptance, and passive acceptance. With avoidance, this means that we attempt to prevent the risk from happening in the first place. We can accomplish this by removing all the work from the work breakdown structure where the risk is present. How do we avoid it? What can we do? How do we stay away from it? That's what we're talking about. Number 2 is mitigation. Mitigation means lessening the impact or lessening the chance that the risk might happen. In addition to that, there's a third step, which is transferring, and that means I'm going to get rid of it. I'm going to take the ownership of that risk and I'm going to give it to a third party or someone else. It's generally accomplished with insurance or by employing external contractors for the work, a consultant. Let them take care of it. I'm transferring it over to them. The fourth piece is active acceptance. In this response, no proactive action will be taken to increase the likelihood of the event happening. Instead, the group will formulate a contingency plan. If it happens, what do we do? What's the contingency plan to enact if this does occur? And we may create a plan B, a plan C, a plan D. We will understand, if it happens, what our path forward is. And then finally, passive acceptance, similar to what we talked about with a positive one. With passive acceptance, the team isn't going to do anything. If it happens, it happens. It's a low risk from an impact statement to us from a negative perspective, and it has a very low chance of occurring. We're just going to let it happen. If it does, it's not going to impact us. Now, those are the different pieces of controlling risks. The final process is the risk management plan, where we wrap it all together. This is where the project manager will monitor the project in order to ensure that the responses to the risks, both positive and negative, are in line with a successful completion of the project. At this point, a project manager will use risk auditing, reassessments, project meetings, workarounds in order to deal with these risks. They will also handle them on a weekly basis. Sometimes if you're in a very volatile type of project, you could have to deal with these on a daily basis because things could change that rapidly. I've seen it before in a situation where not only on a daily basis were we dealing with risks, but we were dealing with it in multiple shifts because we were in a testing environment and you had to look at it from this test shift, this 8-hour window. What are the risks that could happen? And then what after that 8 hours, another 8 hours, and then another 8 hours. 3 different shifts in one day, all looking at things to make sure they understood how they could handle those and move forward with them. Finally, we're going to talk about a couple different things: management reserve, contingency reserve, what the difference is, how that fits. So funds that are for contingency use are established in order to cover the risks that were not accounted for during the response planning. These are outside of that original understanding, that scope. These risks were not addressed with proactive plans. possibly because it was not effectual. The funds that are provided for any given project in contingency planning should be commensurate with the overall risk of the project. In other words, that is to say that the greater the risk, the more funds should be within the reserve to cover it. Since the risks can differ greatly from a project to another project, it is generally not a good idea to create a baseline that is detached from the amount of risk. Unfortunately, this can be a common practice within the industry. It seems to happen all the time. Now, these funds should not be placed into a single lump sum, but instead be allocated by item. So you look at things item by item as you're moving through the project. Contingency reserves are set up to handle or address those as they occur. Okay? Now, in practice, there's quite a few projects that maintain two separate reserves. They will keep a contingency reserve and a management reserve, and they'll keep those separate. The management reserve will be used for the previously unidentified risks associated with a number of different projects and will not be under the purview of the project manager. I don't have access to those. These funds are reserved for the type of risk referred to as an unknown unknown. These are things that I have no idea they were going to happen, and we didn't anticipate they were going to happen. These are the risks that not only did the project team not know about, but ones they had no way of possibly knowing about. The contingency reserve, on the other hand, is controlled specifically by the project manager and is dedicated to known unknown risks. These are the types of risks that were identified earlier, but it is unknown when or if they will actually occur, but I do have something in place to handle them. Now, let's go to the positive side and talk about opportunity management. Both the project plan and project outcomes might be heavily influenced by the opportunities within a project. Good things happen sometimes, and if they do, I want to take advantage of them if it makes sense. So it's wise to address them early within the project life cycle. Opportunities are positive risks, and when addressing something that was originally defined as a risk, we might find that there are opportunities inside it. Such opportunities might include taking an upgrade off the critical path, by starting other work early in the schedule. We might reach into major milestones and implementation dates sooner to create a different possibility for us. When there are generally many opportunities and risks within a project, generally there isn't much time to formally discuss them. They need to have been set up in a process where I can engage them quickly, especially positive opportunities, because they may only be available for a short duration of time. If I don't take the opportunity to do it now, once it passes, it's not available anymore. So to ensure that all the participants have the right information, it's important to effectively document and categorize both the risks and the opportunities within the project opportunity log, that risk register. And it is helpful to update and review these tools regularly. My recommendation would be, on a minimum, once a week, talk to the team, pull the risk register up and say, this is where we are in the project. Here's our risk register. What do we have in front of us? Is there anything new that is surfacing? Is it anything we want to think about? Project opportunity, much like with risks, it's important to consider changing plans for the major opportunities when they arise. How can we make that shift? Sometimes it's called a pivot. How can we pivot to that positive risk? It'll be advantageous to create contingency plans for everything but minor opportunities. So if it's something major, definitely we want to think about it. If it's something very small and minor and the impact is very, very little to us, let's not spend our time there. Let's focus on the big fish. The process of opportunity management is focused on discernible outcomes. The collaborative approach to business and economic development is comprised of three different parts that we want to focus on. One, generating ideas. We need new, unique, great ideas. Two, recognizing opportunities when they become available. You can see them on the horizon sometimes. Sometimes you can't see them till they're right in front of your face. So you have to remember that. And then how do we drive opportunities? How do we always create that position where if it does arrive, it's something that we can take advantage of? Aspects of the project might be going very well, but bring no benefit because other work is still required to be done. Every day, we still have to do the daily work. We have to continue doing the battle rhythm work day to day to day to move through the project objectives, but at the same time, we have to have a visibility to the horizon that opportunities may arise. Opportunity management seeks to understand what might go better in a project, while risk management is focused on what we might go wrong with. Okay? Now let's talk about types of opportunities. Opportunity management has become increasingly popular within organizations as they mature, as they become, more aware of what's going on, as they begin to look at how they might be able to do things better. They tend to search beyond just their risks and attempt to bring structure to how they can perform better. The way to do that for management, for opportunity management to be successful, it must create and protect value to the managerial processes. It should become a part of the business culture. It should be ingrained in everyone in the team, everyone that the team interacts with. Since organizations have what we refer to as limited resources, it's important that the opportunity management process is mindful. And there are 3 types of opportunities we want to talk about: scoping choices, planning choices, uncertain events with potential benefits. All 3 of these relate to risks. While some opportunity types can reduce the overall project risk, most increase the overall project risk and serve as a source of potential complications. Those complications can come back and haunt you, or those complications can be an opportunity that becomes extremely optimistic. It's valuable to maintain a level of realism also. So you can't drink the Kool-Aid and think that things are going to be great when they aren't. If it's not realistic, it will present excessive risk and lead to the project's failure. One initial assumption about the results of a scoping choice are that the value is going to exceed the initial assumptions about the results and costs. So don't forget that opportunities and projects tend to have a proportional relationship. The greater the opportunity, the greater the risk. It is also prudent to note that the greater the overall project opportunity, the more likely the benefits are inflated. That may not be exactly what you think it is. So you've got to bring in a level of realism. So don't forget, initial bottoms-up planning for projects are rarely accurate for the expected time, cost, and other objectives. Project managers will often make adjustments to these and trade-offs to the project plan as part of the planning process. They will search for a realistic approach to the work that conforms as much as possible to the requests of the sponsors, the stakeholders, and opportunities for plan optimization. Resource conservation and schedule compression will often result in additional modes of failures, other things going wrong, and potentially have new risks. Now, uncertainty, that VUCA environment, is constantly around you. So when we talk about uncertain event opportunities, this type of opportunity will have inherently uncertain aspects, since elements of the work will be unknown to the team, and their estimates won't be precise. The variance of outcomes may range from beneficial to adverse. Potentially beneficial outcomes may also be difficult to assess, and by that, it's similar to looking at the image on the left. You might see 2 faces looking at each other, or you may see a chalice, depending on how you look at it. For companies, discerning their risks and opportunities can be a similar exercise. They need to be flexible enough to search and categorize both the positives and the negatives. So developing this capability will require a change in how the organization processes risk management. And it's critical from a financial perspective to better manage and benefit from risks. In closing, ultimately what I want you to remember are these 7 pieces, these 7 elements, so that a great project manager can really understand this from an executing standpoint. Clearly define the scope of your project up front as well as you can, and then update it. Make sure you update it. If it's changing, make sure you categorize those changes. Make sure you track those changes. Number 2, Carefully select the members of your team. Make sure you've got the right people that can do the right job at the right time. Number 3, outline your goals and keep them SMART. Make sure they're realistic. Manage your data. Monitor your progress daily. If necessary, monitor it more than once a day. Key elements that happen during the day may be things that you need to track and understand this is going to happen at this certain time, and then we need to make a choice or decision after that. So that can be a battle rhythm or a mantra that you as a project manager implement. I want to know after this happens what has happened so that we can then plan any contingencies we've got in addition to that. So don't forget to foster and develop internal motivation in your team. And finally, that final piece I keep talking about, manage your resources wisely and prudently. You want to get the right people at the right time doing the right thing. And if you can do that, you can be effective and efficient, and you can be a great project manager. That's my presentation for this particular lecture, and I just want to let you know that if you've got any additional questions, feel free to reach out to me. We can talk about any of these particular areas. Have a great week. Bye-bye.